Welcome to the Modern Divorce Podcast. We've got an episode today that you are not going to want to miss. We're going to talk about complex financial asset division and the role of the expert witness. When you would have an expert witness testify in court and what that would look like. And today we're joined by an expert all the way up in the Pacific Northwest, Dave Stolz. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you. I've really been looking forward to this. I am excited to be here.
So you are in Washington, correct?
Yes.
Seattle specifically?
Well, outside of Seattle, Tacoma, about 30 miles south.
Oh, yeah. All right. Is it only 30 miles? I didn't know that.
It's 30 miles in like 2 hours.
See, that's why I didn't know that.
Traffic can really catch up with you here, but just 30 miles.
Tacoma. Okay. So has Tacoma been hit as hard as Seattle has in terms of the culture change, how it's life in Tacoma? Is it very different than it was?
I think we've dodged some of that, which is kind of nice. So Tacoma's been this weird little town where Weyerhaeuser, which is this, back in its day, this massive lumber company, was headquartered here. Russell Investments was headquartered here. And I say was because everybody seems to eventually move away. So Tacoma's kind of this town that's sort of left with a little bit of those things, those remnants. And we're far enough away that we didn't get some of that craziness going on that was in Seattle a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. All right. And how long have you been involved in divorce financial planning and advising?
It's a good thing this isn't a webinar because you can see. So quite a while, probably 20 some years. And it started off by accident. Pretty soon an attorney saying, hey, could you meet with somebody and sort of help talk them through this tax thing or that tax thing relative to a divorce? And then, after a while you get known for doing that, and then it just kind of goes from there. So, and it's really expanded in a good way. I've had a chance to do all kinds of different things, which it's just really fun. Get to meet some amazing people. I mean, that's the fun part about working in this. And you might not think that, but I've met some of the most amazing people, and I'm sure you have too.
I completely agree with you. It's the best part of the job. You get to know people really well, really interesting people who do interesting things. And especially when we're talking about complex asset division, you're usually talking about people who have created something. They created a business, or they've created a patent, or they've designed software, or they've done some very interesting things, and to divide that is often complex and often painful. When we can get agreements, we always want to do that, and you help people come to agreements.
Try.
You try, I try, but sometimes it doesn't work, and you're looking at a business or some other asset, but usually a business, and you don't agree at all on what those values are, or you're determining somebody's income, and income for the business owner can be a relatively wishy-washy thing.
Yeah.
So when somebody comes to you and they say, listen, my husband is claiming he only makes $40,000 in income. Here's the books. What do you do?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And it can be very challenging. So I think the first thing you do is you sort of keep listing, sort of describe the business. What does he do? How long has he been doing it? And you're also trying to read through whether the number that they say they make is close to what it would seem like. So sometimes that's a lifestyle thing. It's like, okay, you do this and you live there and you travel here and you do this and you do all that on, $65,000 a year. Okay, tell me how that works. And so there's a whole lot of things to this, of course. So one of the things you have to do is you have to sort of clean up those books. So you only made $40,000, but there might be so much stuff buried in those books that has little or nothing to do with the business, which is not appropriate from a tax standpoint, but you have to get that stuff out of there, and you have to sort of understand what that is to just to start with, so you have a clean look at the business books. And then you kind of go from there to try to understand it just a little bit deeper and try to understand what's going on.
Okay. All right. So that's for the income perspective. Let me give you another what if. Let's say I bring you a business valuation on behalf of a client, and it's $100,000. and she thinks that it's worth well more than that. What do you do?
Well, you're going to know your spouse for the most part. So the first thing you're going to say is, so why do you think it's different than this? Tell me why this thing. And in most cases, it's because your spouse said, hey, you know what? I pick up this much. I picked up this job and I didn't count the money, or I picked up this and I did this, or I took a piece of land instead of getting paid, or it can be all kinds of things. And so the first thing you want to do is they have a sense of why those numbers aren't right. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to want to start with that, because there's a lot of clues in what they think is going on. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to go in and it's still an income. It can be an income approach. It's like, okay, you're trying to say, okay, what really was the income? And then valuation methods are all kinds of, there's lots of different ways to do it. But you start with sort of trying to get to what a real number is, and then there's multiples you can apply, and there's different ways you can look at it. But you really want to, if somebody comes to me and says, here's this valuation, this doesn't make any sense at all. Can you help me, kind of explain why this is wrong in court or in mediation or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so there's a couple ways then that you can do that. You can do your own valuation, or you can pick apart the valuation that's already been done. Which do you think is more effective?
Well, I think you want to come from a standpoint of having your own opinion, which means sort of coming from your own valuation. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I've done my analysis, I've done my review, here's what I come up with. And then you're going to kind of contrast why there's a difference in the number. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of reasons why. Mm-hmm. You take something fairly straightforward. Let's say a professional, a dentist. Mm-hmm. Fairly straightforward. You can look at ratios to see whether their expense ratios are normal. You can look at gross numbers and see, okay, that's about what you would expect somebody to do with that size of practice. And so those things, I'm not picking on dentists, but you might want to look in there and see if the country club dues are in there and some of the other things that probably shouldn't be, or, a vacation that they counted as continuing education or something. So you have to clean up that, but you have a fairly reasonable way to look at that and think, okay, we're at least in the ballpark. And then you can kind of argue the finer points. The much more difficult ones are the ones that are outside of a normal structure of a business. So you mentioned the software thing. So maybe somebody developed some software and now they've built this company around her, and you just don't go to a book and look up comparable values for startup software companies. I mean, that's difficult to do. Or maybe even a musician or a professional athlete. Like, wow, those are very difficult things, but you still have to do it. The fear of a valuation person, the absolute keep you up at night is you value something for $5 million and then 3 years later they sell it for 65. Right. That's what will keep you up at night. And there might be a reason for that. It might not be because you made a mistake, but you want to know that you've kind of thought through all of those things. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because from the divorce attorney perspective, having worked on many, many businesses with divorces, I see valuations that are all over the place. I frequently see cases where two different experts will come up with a valuation that is $1 million or more different. Mm-hmm. Can you explain why that would be?
Yikes. Well, yeah. So, if you have here, I'll give you my opinion here now, and it'd be fun to hear what you think. So if you have two valuation experts and they both have, how would you call it? They both have a let's try to get this right kind of an approach. I tend to not see as great a difference. Mm. If you have a valuation expert, and I'm being cautious with my wording, that is sort of asked to defend a certain number or asked to lean a certain way with their valuation, then the opposing expert has a problem. Mm-hmm. And the problem being that courts sometimes can't figure out these complex valuations. And so there's a tendency to split it. Mm-hmm. There's a tendency to say, if you say 2 million and I say 5 million, we're going to split it down the middle. Mm-hmm. But that's a very difficult spot for an expert to be in. An expert, you really want an expert on both sides. It's like, hey, let's try to get this right. And we're going to have differences of opinions. My valuation is going to include assumptions yours didn't, but we're going to come at this right. And so sometimes you see these wide variations, and you sort of get the sense somebody drew a line too low. And so an expert has to draw, has to, within the bounds of their professionalism, they have to lean toward the higher side to sort of counteract this person who's leaning on too low of a side, if that makes sense. You want experts to be experts. You want them to have their opinion, and you want them to say, this is what I believe. But there is a tendency to, some people will lean a certain way, and that creates a very difficult thing for you, because now you have an expert who's doing their best to get the right number, and they're going up against somebody who will defend a number that they've been asked to defend that maybe is a little different.
I agree with you. I think it is a very hard situation. And usually when that happens, it's not, in my opinion and in my experience, it's not the experts, it's the clients. And the clients are telling the experts, I hired you, I paid for you, I'm paying for this opinion. No, you should not concede that, yeah, maybe this assumption is more correct. With that assumption, let's move the needle. Usually when you can get two experts to communicate, you can come to a closer range of value. So in my opinion, before you go to court, like, you really shouldn't go to court with two experts that are far, far, far away. You should probably depose the experts first, maybe go to a mediation with the experts and the lawyers and see if you can get closer. But if you can't, then it almost seems like whoever's the better performer will tend to win the day, because in Arizona, the judge is not allowed to pick a value in the middle.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. Have you ever seen times when the attorneys will ask the valuation experts to get together and review each other's and try to understand where their differences are and kind of work together on that?
Yes, I think it's a good idea. I
Yeah.
do that as much as possible. I find that two experts, usually they've worked together in the field, in the area for a long time, and there's a certain level of professionalism, and they're going to treat each other with kindness and professionalism. And usually we can get closer. But when the clients are adamantly and completely opposed, then they're rolling some really big dice.
Yeah. I had one woman say that she was surprised when she saw her expert get in the car with the other expert because they had carpooled to the mediation together. It's like, there's only a small group of valuation experts in any one area, and they all know each other extremely well.
Yeah.
And so there's no problem with them carpooling, obviously, but she was surprised. It's like, oh, I never thought they would even be friends, or let alone like work together. And I think, up here, my feeling is the sort of the pool of valuation people is not expanding. It's getting smaller.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's I don't know why that is. But all the valuation people here are absolutely swamped. I mean, it's very difficult to find somebody that, without a 6 or 8 week notice or something.
Absolutely. One thing that this discussion highlights, sometimes you need expert witnesses. You need them to testify in court. You need them to defend your position, especially if something really shady is happening. But most often, as we tell people again and again and again, it is better to figure out how to come to an agreement. Now, you have a new book out that really talks about why it is so hard for people to come to agreements. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. You have worked and built your net worth together, and you are in the best position to decide how to divide that. And putting it in the hands of somebody else, whether it's an arbitrator or a judge or something, gives you the least amount of control. And so it seems to only be the times when it's not even necessarily wild differences, and you see this a lot more than I do, of course, but it's the emotion of it, or the anger of it, or the frustration of it, that just like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. And that's not, you really want to try to step back from that and go, okay, let me think about this. I want to work this through in the best way for me. And, obviously going to court's not going to affirm your hurt or, punish bad behavior or do any of the things that you might hope it does. It won't. So, yes. So the ability to kind of process through this, and in my way of thinking, you're processing two things at once. You have these internal things in your head about the difficulty of this and all the advice your friends are giving you that they're not qualified to give you. And you're trying to understand all this, and maybe the kids are acting out, all these kind of things. And then at the same time, you're supposed to make these financial decisions. Like, well, you're going to keep the house, you're going to change jobs, you're going to go back to school, you're going to do it, And so it's this blur of all this. And that's when your role is so critical, because you can just go, okay, let's just, step at a time. We're going to, go through this and go through that. The book is an attempt to sort of help somebody do that, especially with an attorney. It's by no means a do-it-yourself. It's nothing close to that. It's like, I think that's, without the help of an attorney in some form or another, I think that can get tricky too. And I know you do a lot of work trying to help people with that part, which is awesome. But the book's sort of like, you're trying to process the emotions of it. At the same time, you're trying to make good decisions. And absolutely, you want to try to just kind of put things aside that are hard to deal with and have a conversation and try to work these things out, because you're in the best position to solve this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And many times divorce is such a huge betrayal to people. And that is probably the deepest type of wound. And so if one party is experiencing their divorce as a betrayal, they have an incredibly hard time coming to grips with the idea that we would need to divide anything, because they didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
They didn't ask for this.
Yeah. And we could go on this one for a while. Yeah. The currency of a relationship is trust. And when that's broken, it's really a struggle, and in a lot of different ways. And if it's, I run this survey for people who have been divorced, they've been through the process. And it's like, what's the best advice you got? What's the worst advice you got? What do you wish you knew at the beginning that you didn't know? And try to get some of that input that I can use with people. And and it's insightful. And then so if you look at the majority of people in my survey, the woman made the decision, the wife made the choice. So they made the decision to jump off the dock into the ocean, sort of. And that gives them a chance to process in advance, but it's still so much different than they expect. And so it's like, okay, let me catch my breath and let's get going. But suppose you're not the one who made the decision. Then you've got this thing, then you've got the opposite. You're like, whoa, what just hit me? And just the shock of it is just gonna knock you back. As much as we know we should all kind of know the directions to the high road and we should all take it, it's not easy to do. And,
right.
And you've been, one woman told me the phone rang in the middle of the night, and that's when she discovered there was a problem. Like another woman was calling. It's like, wow, can you imagine? And then it's like, hey, let's make some good financial decisions. It's like, whoa, wait.
Right. Absolutely. Which is why sometimes it's great that the process takes time. Because if, we know, from psychology that if your limbic system is aggravated and you're emotionally dysregulated, we know that you don't make good decisions. We know that under pressure, you don't make good decisions. And this is pressure and it is traumatic. So I want to know this survey. Tell me, what are the biggest takeaways? What do people wish they would have known?
I thought you were going to go with, what's the worst advice you got? That's usually the question I get.
I want to hear that too. I want to go through all of them.
I'll summarize some of them and tell you. So the first thing that is overwhelming is, what did you learn at the end? And it is overwhelmingly positive. It's like that I can do things I never thought I could do, that I could power through things, that I could become a different person, that I could accomplish things I never expected, or accomplish things I was told I could never do. And overwhelmingly, that is what you get at the end in terms of things that changed, or things that how you feel about yourself or whatever. I mean, I don't remember the percentages now, but I mean, very few come back and say, it was difficult. I wish I hadn't, and whatever. It's much more like it was so empowering. But that doesn't mean the process is easy, of course. That's a look back. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was I asked, looking back, do you wish you would have been more, you think you would have been more stronger in your negotiating? And it's overwhelmingly yes.
Really?
Looking back, they say, I wish I would have been tougher. I think you tell me, because you've seen so much more than this, but in that final moment, there's just I just want the last fight done. I just want this over. And then fast forward, 12 months or something, and you go, you know what? I shouldn't have. Now, I don't know, maybe my survey is just for women. So maybe men have a similar, I don't know. I don't think so, but then maybe.
So I'm going to send out a survey like this because I think this is just a great idea. And we have about half of our clients are men and about half of our clients are women.
Okay.
But my suspicion is the higher income earner will be fine. They will go on to make more money.
Sure.
They will go on to financial prosperity. And regardless of whether or not they ended up with half or slightly less than half, it does not matter because they have the ability to create more money. And my sense is for someone who does not have that ability, which is generally women, if you leave anything on the table, cumulatively, it's a bigger loss.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because the higher earner, I never measured this, but I'd say easily 10 years later, they're ahead. I mean, like, I shouldn't say, a number, but you just have that ability to recover. You can't, go back to valuation. You take a dental practice and you value the dental practice and you allocate that to let's say he's the dentist. You allocate that valuation number on her column. But with that valuation number, he has the ability to earn much more than she could earn with that amount of money. I mean, right. Partly it's effort too. Partly the dentist is putting in effort and going to work every day and doing all that. But yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's true.
The business owner, as long as the business has not become wrecked in the divorce, the business owner is in a position to go make cumulative gains. You're now free from a marriage that wasn't great. You might have your children half the time versus all the time. And it is for majority of people a positive experience to get out of a bad marriage. And, they really have the ability to flourish afterwards. And if you're working a job, your ability to flourish is not the same.
Right. I agree.
I don't know what advice I have for people who work a job. Quit.
Well, I guess growing up as a CPA, I love small business. I love, reading your information about you starting your firm and starting these other projects that you've got going. I love that. I mean, there's something just magical about that. And that's not to say everybody has that inclination. And I wouldn't tell somebody to, pull the plug on a nice paycheck and try something without really thinking that through. But there might be opportunities to start something that somebody hadn't thought about before. So
yes, I should retract my advice. I am not telling anyone to go quit their job, but I'm with you. I'm a small business owner. You're a small business owner. It's magical. It's really, really wonderful if you find your passion and you're able to create something that you feel good about and then make a living from it. It's a really great thing. It's probably why I work with so many business owners as a lawyer, and you work with so many business owners as a financial person, and their divorces are more complicated. And, you were talking about how a lot of people can do it themselves, not these people, not the business owners, usually.
Right. So I don't, but I agree with the look back thing. I mean, and other things that were in there, there's some funny things. I can't remember I can't recall if I can remember them all, but you get some answer to some question. It's like, oh my gosh. I don't know. I have to go back and refresh my memory now. But some of the things like, what was the best advice you got? And somebody would say, I haven't got any. It's like, oh my gosh, you didn't get any good advice.
Wow.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Okay. So when does the survey go out?
So I did this. I did this in conjunction with the book because I was afraid of. Well, afraid. I was concerned about a guy writing a book addressed to women. It's like, from a credibility standpoint, how is that going to work?
Mhm.
And although I think it works fine, I was still concerned about it. So I thought, I'm going to try to get some data that I can say. My survey said that the number one argument in divorce is money, which is what it did. So it's like, it's not me saying that. It's like, okay, well, here's what the women I surveyed said. And so it gave me a way to talk about the things that I would have talked about before, but it's not, Dave said, because they don't know Dave. And so how are they going to, that may not mean as much. But when women said, hey, they wish they would have been tougher, it's like, okay, just use that when you're in your final mediation moment. And you might still agree to what you've worked out. Great. But remember that sometimes people think I should have been a little tougher, and just give that a moment to sink in before you say, yeah, I'm good with this, or no, I'm not. And so that was helpful to me to do the survey. So I did it back when I did the book. It ended in October of last year. I'd like to do another one, because as soon as you do one, you realize, oh, I should have asked that question a little different. So I would love to do another one. My sister's a PhD professor, and so she's a survey, that's what she does for a living, I think. So it was very helpful to have her help me craft this, how you word things and how you ask these things. So that was very helpful. There's a little plug for my little sister there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fantastic idea. I want to send out the survey. I don't know if you're willing to share your questions with me, but I would love to send it out.
Absolutely. It'd be fun I don't know if there's a way to work together on kind of compiling information. Anything like that would be great. I'd love to do that.
Let's do it. And then where do we find your book?
The usual spots. It's on Amazon. It's on, Barnes and Noble, whatever. I would say my book's pretty easy to find, because I'm not me writing a book, just saying that out loud sounds weird because I'm not that person. Like I mentioned, my little sister, who's a professor, I think every time I send her an email, I know she wants to correct the grammar and send it back. I'm not a person who writes, I mean, the air quotes, but anyway, going through it, part of the time I would just get sort of stuck or bored or something. I go, okay, what am I going to say? So I started just doodling. So on the cover of my book has this picture of this woman that I just kind of doodled. So it's pretty easy to find my book when you're scanning books. It's the only one that's got a little scribbled picture of a woman at the top of it. So
okay, and what's the title?
Well, it's very cleverly titled, Women, Divorce, and Money.
Women, Divorce, and Money. Sounds fantastic. I have really enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And for our listeners, if you have enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you leave a review, rank it, download it, share it with your friends, go back and download our past episodes. And if there are listeners out there who think that you would be a good guest, we would love to have you on. Make sure to contact us and let us know what topics you would like us to cover on the Modern Divorce Podcast. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is super fun. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.